He is risen. He is risen indeed. I'm not able to give this week's sermon in person, for as today I am in Green Bay and about to baptize my second grandchild. So I pray for blessings on your worship here this morning. Today is 1 week after our glorious Easter celebration, and some of us are still reveling in the glory of that Easter morning. But for others, perhaps, the glow of Easter victory has quickly faded. And so we recognize this morning that there is a now but not yet component to this victory story that we celebrated last weekend. Lauren Winner, who is a historian, author, and lecturer, has a Jewish father and a Southern Baptist mother. And she grew up Jewish, but when she was in college, she converted to Christianity. And in a commentary, she shared the following story from her early Christian walk. She said, "The third Eucharist I ever attended happened at a small theological college in England. The preacher was the woman who eventually baptized me. I do not recall the sermon, but what I remember most clearly is a typo in the bulletin. Christ has died, Christ is risen, and Christ has come again." And being a new Christian, she thought that she might have missed something. She was later reassured it was a typo. But on this second week after Easter, that is a statement that we all wish was true. Because now we know that Jesus is risen. He is alive. He is the victor. But immediately after leaving the parking lot last week, many of us immediately began experiencing brokenness. People having to return to backbreaking jobs in order to pay the debts that drained the life out of them. You know, car accidents still happen, and divorce papers continue to be filled, and children continue to starve around the world, and people continue to kill and to be killed. Destruction and death continue to march on. So we have come down off of our Easter high very quickly. But in reality, the same was actually true for John's audience when he wrote the words of Revelation. The original audience of this book felt the disparity between Easter and the realities of a cruel world. They were being persecuted, and they needed help in making sense of their faith. And so Revelation was written to encourage these persecuted Christians to live in the power of the resurrection when evil seemed to be the only power at work in their world. So Revelation was written as an encouragement. But today Revelation does not seem all that encouraging. In fact, it often creates division. It's a book that is difficult to interpret, and the differences in interpretation have created division. As far as I can tell, Martin Luther never wrote a commentary on it. In fact, he even questioned whether it should be in the Bible or not. And multiple interpretations of it abound in our culture today. And I have seen people supporting one view or another who have attacked each other in a very unchristian way as they go about promoting their particular viewpoints on this book. Regardless of interpretations, divisions today, it was designed to bring comfort. And there are some clear messages to be learned from Revelation. To illustrate this point, I want you to consider the insert that's in your bulletin today. You probably walked in and saw that and wondered, what is that all about? Well, if you look at your insert, it says, the human mind is a wonderfully complex organ. Our brains can actually process a group of words, even if they are misspelled or spelled totally incorrectly. For example, see if you can read the following. So I ask you to go ahead and look at that where the words are mixed up, the letters are mixed up, and see if you can read it. Well, how'd you do? Did you make it through? I think most of you probably did. I'll read it for you just in case you did. And it says, the human mind is a wonderfully complex organ, you see. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word appear. The only important thing is that the first and the last letter are in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, isn't it? And I think this illustration this exercise helps to illustrate the book of Revelation for us. Sometimes it doesn't seem to make sense. There are even spots where everything seems to be a total mess. But yet even in all the messiness, a message still comes through clearly. Well, what is that message? Well, there are, I think, two things that I'd like to highlight this morning. First of all, Jesus is the victor. He is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Revelation begins by reminding us that God is in charge, and he will have the last word. The one who was and is to come, both in verse 4 and 8, serve as bookends to a passage proclaiming the sovereign power of God. And the passage is saturated with words and images of God's complete dominion. I think the second thing that we can learn is that while Jesus is the victor, it doesn't feel like it yet. And we will have to wait for that victory to come to its completion at the end of time. We can be encouraged by the fact that God has defeated evil on Easter. And that everything that we experience until he comes again is simply a mopping up. Evil is a sore loser, and it does not take defeat very well. And our job is to crash the pity party of evil by announcing that the Lord God is the Alpha and the Omega. That Christ is truly alive and is empowering the church to embody that victory of God. Yes, there are obstacles in our lives that seem to block our celebration of this Easter victory. And these obstacles are actually much like a particular stone that covered a particular tomb in Italy. Nancy Guthrie shares. A minister was in Italy, and there he saw the grave of a man who had died centuries before, who was an unbeliever and completely against Christianity, but a little afraid of it too. So the man had a huge stone slab put over his grave, so he would not have to be raised from the dead in case there is a resurrection from the dead. He had insignias put all over the slab saying, "I do not want to be raised from the dead. I don't believe in it." Evidently, when he was buried,